It's Pro Savings Days at Lowe's. Get up to 35% off select major appliances and save an additional $1,000 when you buy 4 select LG major appliances. Plus, get a free DeWalt 20-volt max 5 amp-hour battery when you buy a select DeWalt 20-volt max tool. Get the job done for less at Lowe's. We help. You save. Valid through 9/26. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See associate or Lowe's.com for more details and qualifying items.
If you thought goldenly breaded McDonald's chicken couldn't get more golden, think Golder! Because new Sweet and Smoky Special Edition Gold Sauce is here! Made for your chicken favorites.
At participating McDonald's for a limited time.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Halloween Podcast. I am your host, Lyle Perez, and you're listening to episode 23 of our special series, The Dark Record, where we uncover history's eeriest stories, one strange and unsettling case at a time. Tonight, we leave the hills of West Virginia behind and cross the Atlantic to the quiet mining town of Pontefract in Yorkshire, England. On the surface, it was an ordinary working-class community, rows of council houses, coal dust in the air, and families living simple lives in the shadow of industry. But in one of those houses, an unremarkable brick home at 30 East Drive, something extraordinary took hold in the late 1960s. The next entry into the dark record, the Black Monk of Pontefract. Let's begin. It started as so many hauntings do, with small signs, strange puddles of water appearing on the floor, cold gusts of air moving through closed rooms, lights switching on and off without anyone near the switch, mundane details that could be dismissed until they weren't. The house at 30 East Drive was home to Joe and Jean Pritchard and their 2 children, Philip and Diane. By all accounts, they were an ordinary family living in an ordinary council house. But in the summer of 1966, the ordinary began to unravel. It started with water, small puddles that appeared on the kitchen floor, sometimes spreading across the hallway tiles. At first, the family thought it was a plumbing issue. The local water board was called out, but nothing was found. No burst pipe, no leaky fittings, no reasonable explanation. The puddles would appear suddenly, then vanish just as quickly. Soon came other disturbances, powder and dust falling from the ceiling without warning, lights that switched on and off at random, green foam seeping from taps, staining the sink with no source behind it. Objects began to shift on their own, cups sliding across tables, furniture nudged out of place. Even heavy dressers and wardrobes seemed to shudder, as if pushed by unseen hands. The Pritchards tried to ignore it, telling themselves it was a trick of the house or the imagination. But it kept escalating. Doors slammed shut with no one near them. Loud bangs echoed through the halls at night. Cold gusts of air swept through closed rooms, raising goosebumps on the skin. And then there was the sense of being watched. Family members reported shadows flickering at the edge of their vision, and footsteps pacing across the upstairs landing when no one else was home. At first, they joked about it, giving the presence a harmless name, Fred. But Fred would prove to be anything but harmless. What began as puddles and flickering lights soon turned into something impossible to laugh off. Fred revealed a temper. Objects no longer just slid across tables, they were hurled across rooms. Ornaments smashed against the walls. Pictures ripped themselves from their hooks and clattered to the floor. The disturbances grew bolder. Heavy furniture shifted in plain sight, wardrobes dragged from the wall, chairs toppled over as if shoved by invisible hands. Strange pools of water reappeared in the middle of freshly cleaned floors, followed by showers of dust and gravel raining down inside the house. The most terrifying incidents centered on the children, especially 12-year-old Diane. One evening, in full view of her family, Diane was yanked violently by her hair and dragged up the staircase, her face contorted in terror as unseen hands pulled her. On another occasion, the family claimed she was lifted and pinned to the floor, her throat gripped by nothing they could see. She bore scratches and bruises afterward, as if she'd been attacked by a physical assailant. Witnesses outside the family claimed to see things too. Neighbors, relatives, and even investigators reported loud thuds, objects flying, and strange shadows in the house. In one of the most chilling moments, a pair of gloves was said to rise up on their own, moving through the air as if worn by an invisible figure, before striking out at family members. By this time, the harmless nickname Fred felt cruelly inadequate. Whatever stalked 30 East Drive had crossed the line between nuisance and threat. The family no longer felt like they were sharing a house with a trickster spirit. They felt hunted by something darker, something with intent. Desperate for relief, the Pritchards turned to the church. A priest was called to the house to bless the rooms and drive away whatever lingered there. Holy water was sprinkled, prayers were spoken, and for a short time, the house seemed calm. But the peace didn't last. Within days, the activity roared back to life, louder, harsher, as if mocking the attempts to banish it. Relatives who stayed at the house reported their own brushes with the entity. Some felt hands clutching at their clothing. Others woke to the sound of heavy breathing in the dark, only to find themselves alone. Visitors watched as lights flicked on and off during dinner, or as entire pieces of furniture scraped across the floor without anyone touching them. The family tried to hold on to a sense of normalcy, calling the thing Fred as though naming it might tame it. But there was no taming what they faced. Even when they gathered their courage and invited friends or investigators to witness the events, the disturbances didn't shy away. If anything, the house seemed to perform. Doors slamming, objects flying, the temperature plunging, until no one could deny that something strange was happening inside 30 East Drive. By now, the presence had stopped hiding in shadows. The Pritchards claimed to see a figure, a tall shape cloaked in black, its outline like a hooded monk. That sighting would give the haunting its lasting name, the Black Monk of Pontefract. The figure in black quickly gave rise to stories that stretched beyond the Pritchard family's walls. Locals whispered that the spirit was more than just a restless ghost. It was a monk, condemned for terrible crimes centuries earlier. Pontefract, after all, had a long history tied to monasteries and executions. Some said the monk had been hanged near the very spot where the council estate now stood, punished for harming children. Others suggested the house was built on or near the grounds of old gallows. Whether those stories had a basis in fact or were the natural result of gossip fusing with fear, no one could say for certain. What mattered was that the legend stuck. Fred was forgotten. From then on, the entity was known as the Black Monk of Pontefract. The monk's image seemed to match what the family described: a dark, hooded figure glimpsed in hallways, sometimes vanishing into walls, Visitors spoke of a sense of dread whenever the figure appeared, as if the air itself grew heavier. For those already frightened by the physical disturbances, the idea that a malevolent monk haunted their home only deepened the terror. It's worth noting that historians have found little to back up the monk story. There's no solid record of a monastery at 30 East Drive, and while Pontefract did have a history of executions, there's no clear link between them and the Pritchard's house. The legend may have grown simply because it fit the sightings, a shadowy figure in a hood, easily interpreted as a monk. Folklore filled in the rest. What is clear is that the legend elevated the haunting. No longer just a local curiosity, it became one of the most talked about poltergeist cases in Britain, remembered as much for the monk's grim image as for the violence inside the house. By the late 1970s, the story of the Pontefract haunting had spread well beyond Yorkshire. Paranormal investigators visited the house, journalists wrote about the disturbances, and it soon found its way into books. Author Colin Wilson included the case in his 1981 work Poltergeist, where he cataloged it alongside some of the most notorious hauntings of the 20th century. Decades later, the story made its leap to the screen. In 2012, the British film When the Lights Went Out dramatized the Pritchard's ordeal. Blending fact with horror, cinema flourishes. The movie introduced the haunting to an entirely new audience, many of whom had never heard of 30 East Drive before. Today, the house has become a destination for ghost hunters and thrill seekers. Paranormal groups book overnight vigils at 30 East Drive, hoping to capture the same unexplained bangs and shadows that once tormented the Pritchards. Some visitors leave with stories of knocks, cold spots, or even scratches. Others leave convinced the haunting has been exaggerated. Either way, the Black Monk has cemented its place in the strange folklore of Britain, sitting alongside cases like Enfield as one of the most famous poltergeist legends of the modern era. As with every famous haunting, the story of the Black Monk has drawn its share of skepticism. For critics, the case rests entirely on witness testimony. There are no photographs, no audio recordings, no independent documentation that can't be explained another way. The only evidence is what the Pritchards, their relatives, and occasional visitors said they saw. Skeptics have pointed out that much of the activity could have been the work of mischief. The family's teenage son and daughter were often at the center of the disturbances, and skeptics argue that youthful pranks, whether deliberate or not, could account for flying objects and slamming doors. Others note that the 1960s and 70s were a period when poltergeist cases seemed to flourish in the press. The more dramatic the account, the more likely it was to be retold. Even the figure of the monk raises questions. Historians have found no hard evidence linking a medieval execution to the property at 30 East Drive. The story of the monk may have been a product of folklore building around the family sightings, a way of giving shape and identity to a faceless presence. It's a reminder of how easily local history and rumor can blur into legend. Still, even skeptics acknowledge one thing: whatever happened inside that house, the family believed it was real. Their fear was genuine. And in the end, whether the events were supernatural or not, the story itself became powerful enough to outlive its witnesses. Joe and Jean Pritchard, the parents who tried to hold their home together while chaos swirled around them, have both since passed away. Their names live on mainly through the haunting itself, remembered as ordinary people thrust into something extraordinary. Philip, the son, grew up under the shadow of the haunting. As a teenager, he witnessed the puddles, the flying furniture, and the figure in black. Decades later, as an adult, he spoke openly about those years, especially around the time of the 2012 film When the Lights Went Out, which dramatized the family's ordeal. In interviews, Philip never wavered. He maintained that what happened at 30 East Drive was real, and that no skeptic's explanation could erase what he saw with his own eyes. Diane, the daughter most often targeted by the disturbances, has taken a different path. Unlike her brother, she has stayed out of the spotlight. Public details about her later life are scarce, and perhaps that's no surprise. For a 12-year-old dragged by her hair and pinned to the floor by unseen hands, silence may be its own form of survival. What is known is that she left Pontefract behind, carving out a private life away from the legend that once made her a focal point of fear. The Pritchards moved on, as families do, but the haunting followed them in memory. For Philip, it became part of his story, something he would one day share with the wider world. For Diane, it became something best left in the past. Joe and Jean did what parents always do. They endured, tried to protect their children, and carried on until their final days. The house at 30 East Drive remains. The family who once called it home does not. But their names, their stories, and their fear are inseparable from the haunting itself. When people speak of the Black Monk of Pontefract, they are also speaking of the Pritchards, an ordinary family caught in an extraordinary storm. The Black Monk of Pontefract sits in a strange place between folklore and modern memory. Unlike centuries-old ghost stories, this one unfolded in living rooms and kitchens that still stand today. It didn't happen in a crumbling castle or an ancient churchyard, but in a simple council house where a working-class family tried to live an ordinary life. That contrast may be why the story endures. It reminds us that the extraordinary can intrude anywhere, even in the most ordinary of places. What makes the Pontefract haunting so unsettling is not just the scale of the disturbances, but their violence. Puddles of water and flickering lights might be written off, but a young girl dragged screaming up the stairs leaves a mark that is harder to dismiss. Whether it was a poltergeist, a trick of frightened children, or folklore building itself in real time, the fear in that house was real. Fear has a way of writing its own truth. The monk himself remains a puzzle. Was it truly a shadow of the past, a spirit bound by ancient punishment? Or was it simply the shape our minds chose to give the unknown? Folklore is full of dark figures, hooded monks, black dogs, faceless shadows, images that carry weight even when the facts are thin. Perhaps the Pritchards and their neighbors reached for the figure of a monk because it fit the dread they felt. Legends grow in the telling, and sometimes the legend tells us more about the people who believe it than about the thing itself. For me, this case raises a deeper question about how we live with the unexplained. The Pritchards didn't move away. They endured, naming the presence Fred, as if giving it a familiar name might soften its edge. It's a very human response. When confronted with the unknown, we try to frame it, tame it, make it something we can live with. But some mysteries resist taming. In the end, the Black Monk of Pontefract is remembered less for what it was than for what it represents. The collision of fear, folklore, and the human need to make sense of the inexplicable. A family's home became a stage for one of Britain's most infamous hauntings, and whether you believe it or not, the story has etched itself into history. That brings us to the end of episode 23 of The Dark Record. we followed the strange and violent disturbances that turned an ordinary Yorkshire council house into one of the most infamous poltergeist sites in Britain. Whether a product of folklore, fear, or something darker, the Black Monk of Pontefract remains a case that refuses to be forgotten. Remembered, retold, and now added to the record. Next time, we head to the forests of Connecticut, where an abandoned settlement has gained a reputation as one of America's most cursed places. A town erased from maps, but not from memory. Its name still whispered in stories of madness, misfortune, and shadows that never leave. We'll explore the legend of Dudleytown. Until then, I'm Lyle Perez, and this has been the Halloween Podcast presenting The Dark Record. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps keep the show alive and weird. You can also explore sources, extras, and more at our Facebook page at facebook.com/The Halloween Podcast or at our website, thehalloweenpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, keep your eyes on the shadows, and remember, when the Black Monk stirs, the house still shakes. Have a good night.